Hello everyone. Myself Dr. Veena RS, Associate Professor, Department of ISC, Dayanand Sagar Academy of Technology and Management, Bangalore. Welcome to the lecture video on multi-threaded programming and lab program 12 of object-oriented programming with Java. Subject code BCS306A for third semester under VTU 2022 scheme. Let us see what lab program 12 states about. It says, develop a program to create a class named myThread. And in this class, a constructor called the base class constructor using super and start the thread. The run method of the class starts after this. It can be observed that both main thread and created child thread are executed concurrently. So if you remember, lab program 11 also talks about creating multiple threads from the default or a main thread using runnable type of interface or runnable interface. So the lab program 12 also talks about creating multiple threads from a main thread or a default thread, but using a thread class. So you have to create one separate class which will act as a thread. That means extending from thread class. Then you have to make use of, or you have to call the superclass constructor using a super keyword, and you should start the thread. And whenever you start the thread, we know that the run method of that class will start executing. And all those threads should be observed for concurrent execution in the program. So concepts or lab program 12, which comes under the concept of multi-threading, we already know. So we will directly start using, or we will know what is the second way of creating a thread from thread class, and then we'll write a lab program 12. So we already have seen in the lab program 11 session or multi-threaded programming session that there are two ways to create a thread. One way is by implementing runnable interface, and the second way is by extending thread class. Whenever you say you are using a runnable interface, there are two various steps where you say that you cannot instantiate runnable interface. That's why you have to pass the instance of the class which is implemented from runnable interface to the thread class constructor. And then you should invoke a start method which is going to call or which is going to execute a run method of that respective thread. Now, lab program 12 is basically creating multiple threads using the second way to create a thread, that is by extending thread class. So we will again review this, that by extending thread class, what are the steps you should go ahead with. You should create a class which will extend from thread class. Thread class is from the package java.lang. You have to define a run method and put the business logic in that particular method, whichever that thread wants to execute with. Next, create a child thread by creating an instance of that class which is defined in step number 1, and then invoke a start method which will start the execution of the run method. So lab program 12, that is multi-threaded programming using the thread class, something goes like this. You have created a class named myThread, which is extending from thread. So extends thread. As it has been mentioned in the problem statement that you have to call the base class constructor or superclass constructor, that is a thread class. So the moment you say myThread is a class that is extended from thread, so we know that myThread is a subclass and thread is a superclass. So you should be able to call the superclass constructor, that is a thread class constructor. So we have created one constructor for the current class or for a subclass, that is myThread, by passing the name. So suppose I say name is a variable which is of type string, is going to act as the name of the current thread or whatever the thread you are trying to create an instance of that particular class. And this constructor should first call the superclass constructor by passing the name of the thread. So which will call the thread class constructor with a thread name, and it should start the thread. The moment start method is invoked, it is going to call a run method. Inside this run method, I have written a business logic or some logic that thread will get execute or thread will execute is displaying the numbers from 1 to 5. So we have written for loop from integer I equal to 1 to less than or equal to 5, I plus plus, and we'll just print some message. And what that message is doing is get name. Get name is going to display the name of the current thread, followed by count as the message and the value of I. So it says, suppose it is a my thread 1, it says that my thread 1 count is 1, then 2, then 3, then 5, 4 and 5 and all those. And we want to give a delay in between. So you can always make use of a sleep method, which is of type static from the thread class. And sleep method, you can use it only within the try block because it may have some exceptions also, that is interruption also. So it should be able to throw the interrupted exception. So in try block, we have written thread.sleep 500, which is going to make that particular thread enter in idle state for 500 milliseconds. And try block will be immediately followed by either the catch method or a finally block. But as we want to catch the particular exception, if it occurs, we have made use of catch, and the exception is interrupted exception. And if there is any interrupted exception that is occurs or thrown, that particular exception will be displayed, or name of that exception can be or name of the thread will be displayed saying that it is got interrupted. So this is what the entire class, which talks about one part of a program. And this we can have multiple parts of these classes which can run parallelly along with the main thread. Like this, you can create n number of classes which are extending from thread. Every run method of that class will be different. That is, the logic of run method may be different. And the moment you say start for object invoked with, you will see all the business logics will be running simultaneously along with the main thread. So this is what the main thread or a default thread which get executed whenever you start executing the program. Suppose the first line we have written as main thread started, and it should display the name of a main thread. And then how many other threads you want to create? Two various threads. So thread 1 and thread 2. So when you say thread 1 is of type my thread, you can see here thread 1 is of type my thread. And my thread is basically a class which is extended from thread. So you can directly create an object of this using a my thread constructor. It's not like that. You have to create an instance of that class, and that instance you will pass it as a parameter or parameter to the constructor of thread class. Here you can directly create an object of my thread class, which is extended from thread. So you have written here new my thread. And what is the message you have sent here, or what is the name is child thread 1. So here you can say that whatever the string value you have passed it here in the constructor, that will act as the name of a thread. So thread 1's name is child thread 1 and thread 2's name is child thread 2, because here you say that in my thread constructor, whatever the parameter you pass, that will become the name of a thread, because that name you are passing it to the superclass constructor. And then you have written some business logic here also in the main thread. For I equal to 1 to 5, it should be able to display the main thread count, that is from 1 to 5. And again, there you want to give some delay in between, so you can make use of a sleep method as you have done it for the my thread class run method also. And lastly, you have written main thread ended, and that name of the thread, that is main thread, to be displayed on the screen. So once again, if you analyze this program, you can see that total there are 3 threads running. One is the main thread, that is the default thread, which has created 2 threads, that is thread 1 and thread 2. So thread 1 and thread 2, you can call it as the child threads, which has been invoked or which has been created from a main thread. And those 2 threads will have their own business logic, and those logic also will get executed concurrently or simultaneously. So 3 threads running parallelly. One is main thread, one is thread 1, and one is thread 2. What is the job of main is it is going to print the values from 1 to 5 with some delay in between, that is 500 milliseconds. And at the same time, thread 1 and thread 2 will also have the business logic, that is it is going to print the values from 1 to 5 with a delay. So now every time you execute this program, you'll see that a random thread 1, thread 2 and main will get executed, because I have not made the child threads to once if it doesn't complete the execution, I want to wait it. Like I have not used the join method to wait for finishing the execution and all. So you will see the threads will, once they wake up from the sleep state or the idle state, it will start executing. This is how the lab program 12 is. I'll just take you to IntelliJ IDE so that we can execute this program and we can see what will be the output of the program. So here you can see I have just copied the program here, where we have created a class named myThread, which is extending from thread. So myThread will act as a thread because you are dealing with inheritance from thread to myThread. You have created or you have defined one constructor for a subclass that is myThread by passing some string value, and that value will become the name of the thread. And every thread, once it is created, the object is created, the object should invoke a start method. And the moment start method is written here, it will start the thread. That means it will start executing the run method. In run method, what we are doing? We are printing the values that is from I1 equal to 1 to 5 using, and that count value to be displayed along with the name of the thread. And there should be a delay in between printing. And these two threads are created in the main thread, and main thread also has its own logic by printing the values from I equal to 1 to 5 using a main thread. So if I run this program, we'll see what will be the output. So you can see here. So here you can see when you say the output, first it says main thread started because the first line in the main is main thread started. And after main thread started, only it has created two threads, and these two threads will start executing because of the start method you have written in the constructor of my thread. So here you can say initially the my thread is equal to 1, then child thread 1 has started. At the same time, there would have been started with child thread 2 because child thread 1, when it has printed the value of 1, it is waiting for 500 milliseconds. So by the time child 2 will come, that is child thread 2 will come and it will start executing. And in between, even the main thread will wake up, then main thread will also have its own business logic to be executed. So like this, you can see the output of the program. And it need not be always child 1 followed by child 2 or followed by main. It can be any random based on whichever thread is completed or it has entered into the sleep mode or in idle state, it will start suspending the thread, and later it will wake up and it will start executing. So this is how the output of the program lab number 12, where we have created multiple threads from main thread using thread as the class. That is the second way. So this is how the second lab program 12 executes, and this can be the output of the program. The first line is constant because we have written it at the beginning of the main method before creating the child threads. And last statement is main thread ended because that is what the last statement is been written. So all the child threads, once it gets over, then main thread will come into picture or main thread will get terminated or ended at the end of the program execution. So this is how lab program 12 can be demonstrated. I hope all of you understood lab program 12. And as far as the subject code BCS306A is concerned, that is object-oriented programming with Java, there are 12 programs which are listed in the syllabus. And this is the last, that is the 12th program in the syllabus. So if you have any queries with respect to any of the programs in the syllabus, please, you can write down the queries. I will try to solve those queries and get back to you. I hope all of you understood all the video sessions which I have explained here. And if you have any other queries or any other topics to be explained from my side, please let me know. I will do the videos for the same and I will post it in the channel. Thank you so much. Thank you all.